Hola clase, vamos a hablar en el pasado hoy. We're going to talk about the past today. In English, when we talk about the past, we just do it without thinking. We just say what we did, we say what we used to do, and move on with our lives. But in Spanish, especially for an English speaker, you have to think about what your intent is. What are you intending to say about the past? And you guys know that there are two tenses that we use to talk about the past. They are the preterite and the imperfect. And today we are going to take side by side notes about them. And when you take these notes, believe me, you want to skip lines between each item. Because when we get to chapter 8, we're going to go back and add additional information. Essentially, what I'm going to do is give you test answers, and you want to have room to write it exactly where you need it. So please skip lines. Okay, so the preterite and the imperfect. You guys know about their similarities. They're used to talk about the past, and you should have been thinking about what are their differences. But just in case you haven't, today we're going to jot them down. So first, let's talk about the preterite. The preterite, as you know, is used to talk about a completed past action. It's done and over with. Or you can say when something began or when something ended. So it's either completed within a specific time frame, it began, or it ended. We would use the preterite for that. We use the preterite to talk about something that happened one time or a specific number of times. We use the preterite to talk about something that happened within a specific time frame, including emotions. The reason why that is important is because most of the time, if you are talking about emotions in the past, you're going to use the imperfect because that stands for the I in do it, internal emotions and feelings. But if you are saying it happened within a specific time frame, you can use emotions in the preterite. One more thing to talk about with emotions. Again, most of the time you're going to talk about emotions in the past, it's going to be in the imperfect. But if you are talking about an emotional reaction or change, which means you can see it happen, and I'll show you what that means in class. If you can see it happen, it's going to be in the preterite. All right. If you need more time, press pause. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to talk about what the imperfect is used for. Let me adjust this real quick. Okay, again, as you already know, the imperfect is used to say what someone used to do, would do, or did do in the past. Until further notice, we are still saying used to as long as it makes sense in a sentence if we want full credit. Eventually, we'll move away from that because it will stop making sense. But for now, we're still in the used to. And it's used to discuss ongoing or habitual past actions. Someone used to do something every Friday or used to do something every morning, or to say it was happening means it was ongoing. And one way to remember the uses of the imperfect that Senora told me is just do it. And the D stands for description in the past. So if you're setting the scene, the U is for used to do or used to be a certain way. The W is to say that someone was doing something or people were doing something. The ing is very important. You can't just use it to say what someone was or just say the word were, but it has to be was followed by the gerund ing or were blanking. The I is for those internal emotions and feelings that I was talking about, of course, in the past. These are all refer to things in the past. That's what the imperfect is for. And the T is to tell time, again, in the past, which of course we use ser for. So again, you are jotting these down, excuse me, side by side, and you're leaving plenty of room between each item because eventually in chapter 8 we're going to go back in and add some information. All right, another thing we need to talk about when we discuss the preterite and the imperfect is how certain verbs change their meaning depending on what tense you use them in the past. If you had me for 2B, it's very possible that you might already have the notes on the left and you might have already set them up so that you have room to include the information in the imperfect on the right, depending on when you had me. You can look for them and add to them, or it'd be just as easy to write this information down now. So let's talk about our first verb, saber. You guys know in the present tense it is used to say to know facts or information. And In the preterite, you have to turn it into a one time or one moment thing. So what does it mean in the preterite? It means found out or realized for the first time. If you just want to say someone knew something or used to know facts or information, you need to put saber in the imperfect. All right, let's talk about conocer. Also means to know, but in the present tense it means to know or be familiar with people, places, or concepts. In the preterite, to turn it into a one-time thing in a moment done and over with. And we talked about this last year. It's used to say that someone met or saw someone or something for the first time. If you're going to use conocer in the imperfect, you are saying that someone knew or used to know people, places, or concepts. Querer in the preterite will 99% of the time be followed by an infinitive because in the preterite, querer changes its meaning. In the present tense, it means to want, and in the imperfect, it will mean used to want or wanted. But in the preterite, it means you had the urge at the moment to do something, you wanted to do it, and it even implies that you did. But it has to be followed by that infinitive because you had an urge at the moment to do something or you wanted to do something. And again, it might even imply that you did. It also changes its meaning if you put no in front of it. No querer plus infinitive means you didn't want to do it at that moment. That's what makes it the preterite. Or even that you refused. It implies that you refuse to do something. Whereas querer in the imperfect just means I wanted a pony. I used to want a pony. Whatever the case may be, that's the imperfect. Poder in the preterite also changes its meaning. You know, in the present tense, it means to can or to be able to. If you put it into the preterite to turn it into a one time thing, it means that you could do it and you did. Again, it usually refers to at a specific moment. Whereas if you're just saying, oh, I wasn't able to tie my shoes until I was 8, or I used to be able to stand on my head, or I could pop wheelies. That would be the imperfect. But poder in the preterite means you could and did, and it usually refers to a specific time. Again, poder also means something different if you put no in front of it. In the preterite, it means that you couldn't and you failed. Couldn't and you failed at that moment. One more thing, you guys had these again in your notes from Spanish 2B, but ponerse plus adjective means became something. You know that ponerse in the preterite is a teacup. Poner's stem should be pon, but it is not. In the preterite, it is pus. So if I said me puse feliz, it means I became happy. And that goes back to the previous page where if it's an emotional reaction or change, it's in the preterite. So ponerse plus adjective means became. And ponerse plus a plus infinitive means that someone started or began to do something. Maybe you guys remember the vocab from that chapter. It was like I started to shout, I started to cry, we started to cheer. Ponerse plus a plus infinitive in the imperfect means started or began to do something. There is no use of these in the imperfect that you guys will be using. So here is a side-by-side comparison of what certain verbs mean in the preterite versus the imperfect. Most of the time these things will be used in the imperfect unless you're talking about a specific change or reaction or something that happened at a moment, because these things do all refer to internal emotions and feelings, which will usually be the imperfect, unless of course we're talking about an emotional reaction or change, which makes them be used in the preterite. Alright guys, you should have these in your notes. It will be very important and useful for you as we move forward. Adios.